Good morning, everybody. And yeah, that's me. And thank you for coming. I was, okay, now we're starting. I'm Lina Abu Habib from the Asfari Institute at the American University of Beirut, and I'm very, very happy to have you in this high-level event. It's a long title, Labor Law Reforms, Legal Challenges, and Policy Initiatives. And before giving the floor to our guests and our stellar panel of speakers, I just wanted to reflect a little bit. We truly recognize that we're meeting today to discuss a very important subject, which basically reflects age-old discrimination, which basically is indicative of the gender inequalities in Lebanon, because we're here, but also in the region and worldwide. But we also recognize that we're doing these conversations in very unusual circumstances, when there's ongoing violence and ongoing conflict in the region, and the loss of civilians everywhere. We totally recognize this. And I was reflecting with our friend and colleague and partner, His Excellency, the Minister of Denmark, the ambassador, I'm sorry, but maybe this is your next step. Who knows? From how did we, I mean, for my generation, how did we manage during the 15 years of war, and did our lives stop? And what kind of resistance we actually, what different iterations of resistance we devised during that period? And life didn't stop, but we actually, the form of resistance is by being there, by contributing intellectually, and by challenging all forms of violence. And I think this is exactly what we're trying to do at the American University of Beirut, but also all of us collectively. I think it would be a major contribution to remain intellectually active, and also active at the community level, at the policy level, during what is probably, at least what I remember, one of the most difficult of times currently. So I want to welcome you for being with us, and I want to acknowledge also and honor the presence of a group of very, very special women amongst us, our colleagues, migrant women workers in Lebanon. Thank you for being with us, and thank you for bringing your voices, because this conversation is very much about what discrimination is and what intersectionality is, and how we contribute to this consciously and unconsciously. So thank you very much for being with us. This is a high-level event, meaning that conversation and research has been done before it, and we're now bringing the outcome of these conversations to be debated at this level, and hopefully to be taken further in advocacy and lobbying forum. I want to remind all of us that we will have, most of us will be involved one way or the other in the upcoming UN Commission on the Status of Women in New York in 2 months, and which will be, the main topic will be about financing gender equality. How do we resource initiatives that actually lead or contribute to gender equality? And I think our work falls directly within this. This has been a very long introduction. I just wanted to welcome you and welcome our first speaker and ambassador for gender equality, I would say, Her Excellency Anne Meskanen, the ambassador of Finland in Lebanon. Anne.
Merci bien, Lina. Sabah al-Khair, bonjour, dear friends and colleagues. It is really my pleasure to speak on behalf of the Nordic countries and my colleagues from Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. We are extremely pleased to see our project going ahead despite the events in the region. Thank you for this goes, of course, to our partners, the Asfari Institute and UN Women, as well as to our local partners, of whom very many are here today as well. As you know, in the Nordic countries, we firmly believe that true gender equality is not a lofty ideal, but it is an achievable reality through concrete policy actions, through concrete policies and actions. And at this stage, I would like to underline on how two particular policies, meaning childcare and parental leave, have contributed to women's economic empowerment in our dear countries. And these policies have made it possible for women to participate in the workforce in addition to having a family. Gender equality also leads to economic growth, manifested in increased GDP, as per evidence provided by very different studies. The Nordic countries have benefited enormously due to the increased women's participation in the workforce. In our countries, it is a common understanding that we cannot ignore the potential of half of the population. Nordic countries provide high-quality services at reasonable cost, most important being, of course, the daycare for kids. Our approach to childcare is grounded in principles of inclusivity, accessibility, and high quality. And let me underline high quality. These services are available to everyone, irrespective of the family's income level. This is also rooted in the belief that every single child reserves the best start for his or her life, regardless, of course, of their family's socio-economic background. Also, care workers are in general regarded as a valuable part of our society. In the end, they are the ones who are taking care of the future generations. This attitude and also appreciation towards care workers has followed from formalizing and professionalizing the sector. Care workers need adequate training and education, and of course, that's why they are also paid accordingly. Dear colleagues and friends, another example from the policy level is our commitment to parental leave. In the recent years, legislation has been shifting in the Nordic countries so that parental leave days are being divided more equally between both parents. By allowing both mothers and fathers to take time off from work to care for their children, we promote a culture of shared responsibility in parenting, breaking down, and please, breaking down traditional gender roles and fostering equality within households. Mothers are still taking the majority of leave days, but gradual shift can be seen with more and more men embracing parental leave. Our commitment to gender equality goes beyond policy frameworks. It is strongly embedded in our societal values. We acknowledge that women's economic empowerment is not only about creating opportunities, but it's also removing barriers. By championing policies that support work-life balance, offering affordable and accessible childcare, and ensuring equal opportunities for men and women in the workplace, we have been able to empower women economically. Dear friends, chers amis, I'm sure that we all know too well that the stakes and costs of women's exclusion in the economy are too high to ignore. And let me underline, it is high time that also here in Lebanon, the society understands that it is possible to combine successful career and family. I know that very many of you here today have already been working on finding solutions and raising awareness on the need for childcare services and flexible work arrangements. It is important that these efforts are continued together in the coordinated manner. None of the needed changes and recommendations laid out in the outcome document can be achieved without structural changes, political will, and bold decisions. But let me say that I'm sure we are on the right path, and together we can work towards creating a world where women's economic empowerment is not an exception, but a norm. Shukran jazilan. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. And thank you for basically making these rights, talking about these rights as normal, as something that every single woman should have, regardless of status, regardless of who she is, regardless of what she does. Thank you so much. We were supposed to have with us Dr. Halima Qaqour, parliamentarian Dr. Halima Qaqour. We have now a recording from her. She's unable to be with us because she's been called on parliamentarian duties. I have to say that very recently, my colleague Sarah and we had a deep conversation with Dr. Qaqour, and we were actually very much impressed by the ways in which she is actually using data and using solid research and using credible research to propose law petitions in Parliament. And we're very happy to have with us Dr. Qaqour, has been our partner in this series of convenings from the start. And I would like to welcome her virtually. This is a recording, it's not a live. We didn't want to take chances with the internet.
Women's labor force participation in Lebanon is among the lowest in the region and the world. Lebanese women are twice as likely as men to be unemployed, work in unfavorable conditions, and receive lower pay. According to the Global Gender Gap Index of the World Economic Forum, Lebanon ranked 132 out of 156 countries in 2021. The state had closed 96.4% of the gender gap in educational attainment. However, only 48.7% of the economic participation and opportunities gap had been closed. This means that while men and women are nearly equal in capabilities, women have less access to job opportunities. The law lacks clear mechanism for monitoring the private sector and imposing penalties for discrimination in terms of wages, promotion, and skills in either the public or private sectors, especially those discriminating against women. Despite a higher level of education, women earn 71% of men's earnings, demonstrating a noteworthy wage gap. This low economic engagement of women in Lebanon is caused by the poor legislation related to care work and the lack of proper family-friendly work policies such as childcare entitlements and maternity leave. In addition, the patriarchal system and the cultural barriers in Lebanon contribute largely to such discrimination. The Lebanese labor law exempts the domestic workers and agricultural workers from its provision. The majority of these categories, especially women, do not benefit from social security contributions. Social security and protection measures such as parental leave and welfare payments are either non-existent or not aligned with international conventions and standards. So, we need to amend the labor law to eliminate all provisions that discriminate against women, ensuring full gender equality, and to separate provisions from women's work from those governing minors and infants, and to establish a specific system to protect farmers, both male and female. We need also to abolish the kafala system and to include domestic workers of all nationalities in the labor law. We also need to implement a clear mechanism to achieve equal pay for equal work between genders and impose penalties. Attaining a more equitable society and narrowing gender differences is desirable not just from a social equity perspective, but also because doing so will benefit the macroeconomy. Higher gender inequality can impede growth, productivity, and development outcomes. It can also impede the participation of women in politics and decision-making. The last study I conducted about women participation in politics in Lebanon with UN Women showed that 43 women candidates amongst 45 married candidates confirmed that without the moral and the financial support of their husbands and their tolerance regarding the care duties they have, they would never be able to run for election. Finally, I'm dedicated to ensuring my full commitment to collaborate effectively on this project with the Asfari Institution and all relevant stakeholders involved.
It's too bad that Dr. Fakour is not with us, but I think you'd agree with me that this is the kind of narrative and commitment we'd like to see in Parliament. And it's amusing to compare what she's saying to when her male colleagues who have been in Parliament generationally, I would say, and just to compare the levels of commitment and understanding, I think it's, barring Michelle, of course. Okay, well, I thank Dr. Fakour on your behalf. And moving on to another sector that basically reproduces gender inequality severely, but it's invisible. It's a sector that is very much a masculine sector. So I'm very happy and proud to have with us Her Excellency Dr. Tamara Zein, the Secretary General of CNRS, the Conseil National de la Recherche Scientifique. Women in STEM has long been a hermetic area. And we're very happy with Dr. Zein being at the head of CNRS and looking forward to hearing your remarks, Dr. Zein.
Sabah al-khair. So, Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear Lina, good morning. So it's a pleasure for me to be among you today, and I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to this high-level panel. As we are talking about women's empowerment, I believe, and I think you agree with me, that academia and research sphere is one of many requiring serious actions toward equality, mainly concerning the narratives of scientific discoveries and women's participation in research and knowledge-based economy. As we all know, throughout history, as she said, Lina, women were somehow invisible, and women scientists have been underrepresented and often uncredited for their contributions. I remember very well as a chemist, when reading about the chemical revolution, we used to learn about Lavoisier, called the father of the chemical revolution, without any mention of Marie-Anne Pauls, for being not only his partner in life, but also his partner in chemistry, and for having played a crucial role in many of their discoveries. There are countless stories showing the bias of narratives and proving that inequality is deeply rooted in the scientific ecosystem where women scientists are almost invisible. Even today, we continue, unfortunately, to face an uphill battle to bring groundbreaking work of women scientists to the fore and to transform the predominant narratives. In Lebanon, before 2019, we had no wide interest in analyzing and understanding the academia and research sphere, even though there's an obvious evidence of women's underrepresentation in research and leadership positions. This was one of our motivations to establish 4 years ago, with the support of UNESCO, the National Observatory for Women in Research, Dawri Kunna, as a response to understand equality in academia and research. And it was the first time that we had the pattern of females' academic careers. Despite a majority of women at the doctoral level, the percentage of female researchers does not exceed the 27% in STEM fields, 42% in humanities and social sciences. Women are less than 20% as faculty deans, and this is for the whole system, university system in Lebanon. And they are less than 8% as university presidents. And we are talking really about very, very small universities. So this called leaky pipeline is mainly due to the implicit biased hiring process of faculty members and also when appointing in academic leadership positions. In fact, these numbers reflect a loss in terms of return on investment, as these women, after having invested in their studies, don't have the place to re-inject their knowledge in universities or to participate in research activities and knowledge production, while also contributing to achieving many of the SDGs. Also, beyond numbers, we must remember that this disparity is not just about percentages and return on investment. Unlocking the full potential of science requires including the talents, creativity, and vision of women scientists at all levels, and equal representation matters because it brings diversity of perspectives and fairness and equity to the field, and which are the cornerstones to build a scientific community that can carry human-centered research. And with today's challenges, from climate change to disruptive technologies to social transformations, and so on, the presence of women as researchers, but also as field of study, is the key to ensure solutions with positive impacts on the whole society. Advocating equality in academia also matters because in our Lebanese universities, where are enrolled more than 170,000 students, we are shaping the mindset of those who will become later on the workforce of the country, CEOs, politicians, and decision makers. So economic empowerment of women goes also through their empowerment in academia and research, where reformed laws and policies are seriously needed. For sure, to avoid any misleading shortcuts, all these facts should be analyzed in light of the overall political, social, and economic conditions of Lebanese women. Lebanon, and oppositely to the illusion of modernity, is still globally in the lowest equality ranks. I insist on reminding, this is a very personal note, that in addition to what has been mentioned about political and economic participation of women, till today, as a Lebanese woman, I don't have the right to transmit the Lebanese nationality to my children. Finally, I would say that as a scientist and as the first woman appointed to lead the National Council for Scientific Research, I'm hopeful of change and reassured as I see increasing interest in reaching egalitarian society. I think together we will win this battle. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zain, for this framing, which is very important. I think the leaking pipeline, and I think gender social norms, the burden of care, discriminatory legislations are all factors that feed this leaking pipeline. Thank you. That's something that, in addition to everything that you've said, that I will keep with me. I'm very happy to have again our dear friend and colleague and partner, Ms. Jilan El-Masiri, the head of UN Women in Lebanon, the country representative. Jilan, your comments, please.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon. It's truly a pleasure to stand before you today, and I extend my sincere gratitude to the Embassy of Denmark, Finland, Norway, and Sweden in Lebanon, as well as the Nordic Council of Ministers for their unwavering support in advancing the gender equality agenda globally as well as in Lebanon. I would also like to express my appreciation to the Asfari Institute for Civil Society and Citizenship for organizing this important event today. It's actually an event that has been a work in progress, which is really what I like. This event is a culmination of a lot of work and research and discussions that have gone into it. As we gather here today, let's acknowledge the importance of addressing a crucial issue that goes beyond gender equality. It's an issue that resonates with decent work, socioeconomic equality, poverty reduction, inclusive growth, and sustainable development. I am, of course, referring to the matter of unpaid care work. From the earliest stages of life, women's domestic and care work intertwine with family structures and societal norms. Unpaid care work significantly escalates for women upon marriage and motherhood. To break this cycle, we must challenge ingrained social norms that prescribe women as caregivers and men as sole breadwinners. Many women are socialized to strive to be committed mothers and then shamed if they choose to continue their education or careers as moms, while men certainly don't face the same pressures about being a good father on the same dilemmas of balancing work and family. The repercussions of gender disparities in unpaid care work extends into the realms of paid work. Fostering inequalities in labor force participation, job segregation, wage gaps, and political representation. Despite Lebanon's labor laws prohibiting of gender-based discrimination, the lack of punitive measures, as was mentioned earlier, for violations perpetuates discriminatory practices. We often see this in job applications where questions about women's marital status and children often surface. If women continue to face unequal prospects in the labor market, a vicious cycle ensues. Women allocate more time to unpaid domestic work, while men are incentivized to focus on market work. Policies targeting gender discrimination in the labor market are therefore imperative to bridge these disparities. Another critical facet of gender inequality lies in care leave legislation and accessible quality care services. The existing inadequacies in care leave, primarily limited to maternity leave, hinders the redistribution of care responsibility. Paternity leave, which is for fathers, or parental leave, giving the choice to either parent, is very limited. Moreover, there are very few examples of leave policies addressing care for dependent family members other than children, such as the elderly, the sick, or people with disabilities. This is particularly needed in view of emerging deficits in care of the elderly in aging societies such as in Lebanon, and in care of the sick under conditions of health shocks such as the COVID-19 pandemic. I'd like to point out that the Lebanese labor law entitles public and private sector employees to 10 weeks of fully paid maternity leave. This is based on what I've read, and please correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding is that Lebanon has not yet ratified the convention, Convention 183, the ILO Convention 183, which stipulates that maternity leave should be 14 weeks. In 2018, the International Men and Women Gender Equality Survey was conducted by UN Women and Promundo, and it shed light on shifting perspectives. While some men still hold traditional views when it comes to gender equality, many are increasing. There's an increasing number that is embracing gender equitable views, particularly when it comes to supporting women's economic empowerment. Importantly, both men and women advocate for paternal leave, highlighting the role of family role models and early childhood experiences in shaping men's attitudes. Men that see their fathers engaging in unpaid care and domestic work are much more likely to do the same with their own families. However, care leave predominantly benefits formally employed workers, leaving a substantial portion of women often engaged in informal or self-employed work without access. Predominantly migrant domestic workers, women in agriculture are obviously not part of that formally employed framework and therefore do not benefit from these entitlements. Additionally, the underinvestment in affordable quality care services exacerbates disparities, with class intersecting with gender to compound the challenges faced by those dependent on public services. And this is why we say that it is not only an issue of gender inequality, but an issue of socioeconomic justice as well. The decisions women make regarding employment, whether to take it up or not, to quit or choose the type of jobs, are often constrained by the need for work-family balance. That is a choice that women have to think of as a priority. This often results in women opting for part-time employment or more flexible jobs to accommodate their caregiving responsibilities, therefore limiting career advancement and their career trajectory. To address these challenges, we urgently need labor laws and policies that provide for family-friendly practices, including work-from-home options, shared parental leave, compressed hours, job shares, on-site nursery facilities, affordable childcare, and reduced nursery fees. These measures are essential to enable women to balance both paid and unpaid care work and foster an environment where no one is penalized for seeking equality. We also need to scale up investments to be able to finance these policies and practices in the care economy. Investing in the care economy aligns with multiple policy objectives simultaneously. It creates new, decent, and environmentally sustainable jobs. It promotes inclusive and sustainable economic growth. It prevents or reduces poverty, and it contributes to human capital development and advances gender equality and women's empowerment. UN Women's flagship report, Transforming Economies, Realizing Rights, brilliantly frames care as a public good, emphasizing that its benefits extend far beyond immediate recipients. This perspective lays the foundation for advocating increased public investment in care policies and accessible, high-quality care services. The investment in the care economy is not just a moral imperative, it's a strategic move with substantial economic and social returns. These returns are comparable to investments in traditional economic sectors, such as infrastructure. When examining this from both the supply and demand sides, the economic benefits become apparent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jaylan, for this comprehensive framing of care work as a public good, as you call it, which I think is the foundation of all these conversations and also this advocacy work that we want to continue with. And this is a really good segue to our last but not least speaker. And you know, when we talk about care, either in classes or in workshops, etc., one of the things that we asked people to reflect on is that all of us are here in this room as productive adults, as people with a set of skills, but also a set of values. The reason we are here doing what we're doing is that there was so much invisible, paid, rather unpaid, or very poorly paid care work that has gone into us so that we're able to be here and to do the work that we're doing. And with this in mind, I truly have the honor to welcome our friend and colleague, Teresa Pontias, who is the co-founder of the Alliance for Domestic Workers in Lebanon. Your final remarks, Teresa, and thank you for being with us.
Good day, everyone. My name is Teresa Pontillas, a Filipino migrant worker and a co-founder of the Alliance Domestic Workers in Lebanon. We are a non-formal organization founded in 2016 by largely women of diverse nationalities, advocating for equal rights and protection as workers. Our organization seeks to empower our workers by educating them about their rights in Lebanon and providing them with a series of programs such as soap making, and jam making, sewing, and bag making. On behalf of all women migrant workers, I appear before you today to discuss our experiences under the kafala system. As a sponsorship system that fosters contemporarily slavery by cultivating a sponsor-worker power imbalance and sponsor legal impunity among domestic workers. Under kafala, a non-national's immigration status and legal presence in a host country that are linked to an individual sponsor during the duration of the contract. The sponsor has complete control over our visas, work transfers, and even our entry and exit from the host nation. As a result, we are subject to labor exploitation and harsh treatment because only our sponsors have the authority to extend or revoke our visas. Some of the struggles experienced under kafala are restriction of movement and communication because some employers confiscate passports and phones which cut communications from their loved ones. Second, workers are subject to forced labor due to contract substitution a common tactic in which workers accept poor wages and sign multiple contracts in which they don't fully understand. Lastly, irregular residence status is common because workers are fully dependent on sponsors to remain in the country legally. Moreover, this system falls under the jurisdiction of the Interior Ministry. Thus, workers are not subject to protection and benefits stipulated under the host country's labor law. Under the International Labor Organization, Decent Work for Domestic Workers, Convention 189, it states that domestic workers must be paid directly in cash at regular intervals at least once a month. It further calls for workers to be informed of the terms and conditions of their employment, the method of calculation, and the periodicity of payments. However, no host country has ratified the International Labor Organization's Decent Work Convention, and due to this bureaucratic process of the state, this has been ignored and unvalued. Also, children of migrant workers are not obtaining proper education due to lack of legal documents. We urge Lebanon's parliament to heed our calls to amend the labor law, which will include migrant domestic workers. Ultimately, I want to address the long rights of migrant workers. If this will be enforced, I want to address the long overdue passing of the new standard unified contract, which has the potential to advance the rights of migrant domestic workers. If this will be enforced, workers can terminate without approval of their employers if they are subject to any form of abuse or if the employer does not abide by any of the contract's provisions. It stipulates that domestic workers are entitled to the national minimum wage, retainment of identification documents at all times, ownership of phones, and communicate freely and move liberally. To conclude, migrant domestic workers are one of the Lebanese most vulnerable communities. We have long suffered from this abuse kafala system, and so our call is to dismantle and fully abolish the system that trapped us in an environment of domestic violence and discrimination. We propose an open labor market that will allow us freely change employers or join a union without negative consequences. Just like any other workers, we demand for exclusivity in labor law that will protect our right to a healthy and safe working and living environment. We strongly urge Lebanon to uphold these international duties and treat workers in the conformity with international human rights law. We hope for the adoption and full implementation of the new standard unified contract, which will combat that situations that lead to forced labor and servitude. Ultimately, workers' organizations are crucial in information dissemination about migrant workers' rights, and it is our hope that our aspirations for strengthened legal protection and combating rampant abuse will materialize in the future. Thank you. Let me take this opportunity to tell a story that happens just today. A migrant worker, she has been in a victim of human trafficking, and she was been hired. Her first employer did her legal papers, and it didn't work out with the sponsor, so she has to be returned in the agency. And someone took her, another employer, and worked for 3.5 years, not doing her legal papers in Lebanon. So she asked a permission if she can leave and change an employer. And that employer allowed her to find another employer. And she found someone again for a year and 2.5. Now that she's working, that her employer is not doing again her legal documents in Lebanon. So she's ended as illegal worker. And now, today, she was texting, she was asking for help because she was locked up in her room. And today, in the morning, early in the morning, while preparing my speech today, I wanted to help her. And it happens that thankfully for my employer that they support me in what I am doing and advocating for the migrant workers' rights. And he woke up early and he was asking what happened to this lady. She's a part of our church. And she said, what kind of help does she does? And I told my employer that she's locked up in her room. And why didn't they allow her to come out from her room? They accused her of stealing 500 euros and $1,000. So they locked her up, and my boss was thinking over what he can do to help these migrant domestic workers and asking for me if what we can do. There's nothing I can really think about it of how I can reach her. Even if I will reach for the organization, if they have a lawyer, they will not work immediately to advocate for that migrant workers who really need help and immediate help. So this morning, my boss said, I will go to that sponsor. And we will see if he will be, they will allow her to come with me, or they will put her in prison because she was threatened already that they will take her to the prison. And so when my boss went there this early in the morning, he was talking to the employer, what's the problem, and the employer said that, oh, we can do her paper. My boss said, it's been 1 year and 2 months. You have not done anything. And he said, oh, my father is in authorities. And we know all these people from high-ranking officials. We can do that. So my boss, okay, but why didn't you do it for all this year and 2 months? And then he said, we will see, we will take her to the immigration, to the general security, and they will decide for her. And my boss came to the house, was talking to me what happened, and I said, now she will be in prison, for there's no proper investigation if she really stole that money. And my boss was really so pressured also to help her to get out from that situation. And end up, she said, there's two options, there's only one option, because before I left with her sponsor, he asked me if I can take responsibility for her. And my boss said, I will take the responsibility because I want to help her. So when I was there, before coming here, that employer called my boss. And so my boss, that's why I was already here, calling me, because he wants to take me to go to that place where that migrant worker was working. But I said I have to give a speech. But now she's now at home. My boss rescued her, and for the organizations that my boss says, you have a lawyer, you have all this. Yeah, it's all theories, but if we need immediate action, we can find. So this is the situation of the migrant domestic workers, what we are facing. But now I have to leave a quote that a woman migrant workers, our commitment is the voice of all migrant workers who cannot speak for themselves. We work together to a common goals, to dismantle kafala system and raise awareness to include migrant workers in the labor law like other workers. We ask for immediate action for a change. Migrant workers' rights are women's rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. And I can assure you that that example that Teresa gave is just the tip of the iceberg, and it's the living hell of migrant women workers in Lebanon throughout the country. And it's further reproduced, further made possible by a discriminatory labor law and by the non-recognition of care as work and care as a skill. So thank you, Teresa, and I'm happy that you're able to amplify the voices of migrant workers. We've covered different aspects related to our topic and different entry points, and we have a bit of time for the conversation. I know our panelists are not on the stage, but with us. So I'd like to open the floor for questions, remarks, ideas on the way forwards, and any comments that you would like to make. And I would like to, without being too directive, but ask our colleagues also from the ILO to perhaps contribute or share with us what are their plans, their work currently on the issue of labor laws, care work, and the kafala system. So the floor is yours. I think we have half an hour or so. Fuad, could you introduce yourself, Fuad?
Yeah, thank you. So my name is Fuad. Thank you. So my name is Fuad. I'm Professor of Public Health here at AUB and Chair of Forced Displacement Program in the Middle East. So my question, if this is a question, is about the absence of the voice of Syrian refugee women in the discussion, or at least in the opening speeches, whose, as you may know, are the most vulnerable population here in Lebanon. So I guess I was expected actually to hear that voice, but yeah, the speeches are stopped. Thank you.
I agree with you, Fuad. I agree with you that there are many voices that are not with us. Refugee women, whether from Syria or Palestinian refugee women, but also other vulnerable groups. So I think we certainly take this we take note of this. As I said, this is part of the process that is nearing its third phase. And that is something that we definitely will take into consideration. But I totally agree with you. Thank you, Fuad. Zena, and then Zena, can you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Lina. This is Zena Mizhir from the ILO, and I will take Lina's suggestion to have a small intervention. It wouldn't be long, not to take everybody's time. But it's very clear from this event, thank you very much for the way you framed it, the interlinkages between the broader approach to care, unpaid care, paid care, migration and kafala, and also refugees. Dr. Fuad just mentioned it. You may be well aware that at the ILO, we have been working on dismantling kafala for years now. Teresa here is one of also our activists, and I'm very happy to see the strong voice of migrant workers calling for the change, and not just sharing stories, but very concretely knowing what they want. Ratification of Convention 189, amendment of the labor law, dismantling kafala, adopting the improved new revised version of the standard unified contract. And I just like to highlight this term improved, because there is a risk when we call for the adoption of the unified contract, something that we've worked on for many years. It was adopted, but then challenged by the recruitment agencies, yes. So it's put on hold. If we don't mention improved version, there's a risk that the Ministry of Labor and other authorities might put forward a new standard unified contract, but that do not meet the standards. And that is a real risk. So it's very important when we call for change to make sure that it is aligned with international standards. And it's a conversation that we can continue. In terms of the care angle, the unpaid care work is a very difficult discussion in Lebanon because of the gender aspect of it, because of we're redefining the roles within the families. So this is why it's very much also linked to community work, stigma on care work inside the house, and also on the gender roles. And this is also a work that we're doing, and we're happy to share more with whoever is interested to know about it. And that links up to the issue of refugee participation. Care work and domestic work inside households is isolated, behind closed doors. And the stigma on refugees is also even more serious. And this is why through focus group, we tried to see with employers whether they would be interested to employ refugee women in domestic work. And the first reaction was no, despite the need for care work, because there's no public investment in care infrastructure, because of the stigma that on refugee women entering their house, and politics, but also employers, like pure employers' perspective, there's the element of fear. And because it's not recognized as work, it's not recognized as a service that workers are going to provide the service in return for, decent work conditions and proper treatment. So you've opened a lot of avenues, and we have a conversation that is following Lina. Thank you so much for offering this chance.
Thank you, Zena. There was a hand in front of you. Can I ask you to introduce yourself? And then I'm going to ask our speakers, after taking a round of comments, to basically have reflect a few minutes on what you've heard.
Thank you. I'm Angela from the World Bank. I wanted to, just going from the big picture of care, which includes childcare, elderly care, but also people with disability, focusing only on childcare. Childcare, there's two aspects of the agenda. There's the legal legislation, but there's also services. On the legal, I think all the legal changes that need to be made to the labor law are well known: paternity, maternity leave, parental leave, flexible work arrangements. All of these, together with colleagues from ILO, UN Women, we've been discussing, but also with the government. It's a bit too bad there's no one from the Ministry of Labor here to also hear about. But even if those laws are passed, there's so much to do on the implementation, and so much to do on behavioral change, on social norms. Her Excellency, the Ambassador, have highlighted the importance of stereotypes. And I think while those laws are being passed or lobbying to be pushed, we have to work on changing stereotypes, and this will take time. Behavioral and social norms, we have to address those topics, which are structural and very rigid to change. But also what we can do in the short term is also work with private sector companies in changing their internal policy, be more gender neutral, to have a more gender workforce balance. And we've been working together with the IFC, and despite the situation, there are many, many large and medium-sized companies who are interested because they see gender workforce diversity as increased productivity. They have more access to talent, they have more retention, less turnover. So I think while waiting for those laws to pass, we can work on with private sector, but also by working with the private sector, we are also affecting change and norm in the society. In the service part, we've recently launched a report under the Mashrek Gender Facility, which is a trust fund that is generously supported by governments of Canada and Norway. We've recently published a report on a comprehensive landscape of childcare. I think the issue is that there is no diversification of the type of services. There is only center-based care, which are unaffordable for a majority of families now because of the situation, but also have low accessibility. They're mostly in urban areas, coastal areas. We have childcare deserts. However, the issue is that we don't have other form of childcare services. There are many community-based, the grandparents, the family, but those are not of quality. They are very risky, probably not healthy environment. So we need to find ways to diversify and legalize quality care in diverse forms. Just those are quick points that I hope can spark some discussion.
Thank you. And what you've mentioned actually circles back to the many incidents of, I think we have Jumana first, Dr. Farhoud, and then yourself. The many instances of abuses in childcare facilities in Lebanon. in the absence of proper monitoring and legislation. Jumana, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Jumana Zabani, UN Woman. I want to share with you a social experiment we did as part of our work on engaging men and boys and social norms at UN Women. We did it jointly with the social behavioral specialist and the UNDP Innovation Lab through Facebook. We targeted men in Lebanon, specifically in Beirut and Mount Lebanon, and we discovered what motivates men to do more household chores through this experiment. You might be surprised. It's not women's rights. It's not the well-being of the family. It is three things. Men are interested in the dollar value of household chores. So, for example, doing the dishes for half an hour a day costs $5, or wiping the floor does this, or costs, etc. So the dollar value. The second is for younger men, it was obvious that they see house chores as a life skill. So I need to know how to do the dishes if I live alone, if I want to be a modern man, if I want to travel and be abroad with no women around, and so on and so forth. So life skills. And the third, for the older generation of men, and we're talking about 12,000 men that participated in the social experiment, it is being praised by the community. So if I receive praise, if there are others that are doing the same, then I would do it. So this actually pushed us to change the way we campaign for men doing household chores, from looking at the benefit at the level of women to the economic dimension of household chores, to the household economy, and to men's gains. You see?
Yes.
So, and we know from previous studies, we are very happy to share those with you, that there are tasks that men do, and they are okay with it. We're talking Lebanon, of course.
Yeah.
And, for example, it's okay to read a story to a child, to feed a child, that's fine. Changing diaper is an issue. Cleaning after a child is a big issue. Cleaning toilets is a no-go. Cooking is okay from time to time, specifically if it's barbecue cooking. We have that level of detail. So some things, shopping is fine, dropping a child to school, back from school is fine, but you know, the household that is labor intensive, that can stigmatize, these are no-go. And the solution to that, from what we saw from the experiment, is to start with younger generation, specifically with boys at home, and then later on youth, and so on. And it's more difficult to change the perception of older men. Thank you.
Thank you, Jumana. I think another important incentive would be they could do the dishes and then get to mansplain about doing the dishes. That you know, so. But thank you. That's a very eye-opening research. Dr. Farhoud and then Miriam.
Thank you very much for. This is very interesting.
Can you introduce yourself, Dr. Farhoud?
Yeah. My name is Layla Farhoud. I'm a professor at AUB at the Hariri School of Nursing. My specialty is psychiatry, mental health. I'm at the School of Nursing and the psychiatry department. Well, I just wanted to bring this issue of mental health, which is very important. I think we would have really had you know, like if the Ministry of Labor, if we have any data from the Ministry of Labor about who is working, women, men, what kind of jobs, and all of this, this would have really helped a lot. However, probably this is not available at this point. But for me, I would really want, like, we can't really discuss this issue without the mental health issue of women. In my studies in Lebanon, though men and women have been exposed to the same kind of events, we find out that women are more prone to depression, to anxiety, to PTSD, and so forth. And most probably this affects the economic situation, this affects their employability, and let's not really just talk about empowerment, it should be coupled with mental health. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Farhoud. Miriam? can you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Miriam from the Arab Institute for Women at the Lebanese American University. So I want to go back to what Lina said and give a practical example. We need so much to bridge the gap between, I think we need 100 and something years to close the gender gap in terms of rights. But what's interesting to keep in mind is that we need to work on small gains. So I want to give the example of a project that we did that resulted in a draft law, and we decided to adopt the draft law all of a sudden at LAU, where we managed to raise the parental leave policies at LAU internally. Maternity leave became 15 weeks as opposed to 10 weeks, and we have now a paternity leave of 10 days. But the funny part is that after we did that, so this project received an international award at the Times Higher Education Award, and a lot of people who used to frown about شغل النسوين and stuff within the university, not upper management. We have a very supportive president, actually. But a lot of people used to frown about it. All of a sudden, we're talking about the institute. Did you see the award that we got? This is thanks to the institute. So what I'm trying to say is that not just small gains, but also when there's an acknowledgement outside sometimes the confine of a university about something positive, then all of a sudden everybody starts to think in terms of, maybe it's the low-hanging fruit. Maybe we should concentrate on that simply because it gets us visibility. So I think it's important to
Thank you, Miriam. And it circles back to what Jumana was saying. What incentivizes, what sort of incentives bring about social change in social gender norms? I want to ask our panelists to basically perhaps comment on what you have heard. Maybe Jaylan, would you like to start? Jaylan.
Thank you. Just a few reflections on the importance of engaging the private sector, which was mentioned. I fully agree. For the private sector, they do see this as a potentially win-win situation. So as UN Women, when we engage with the private sector under the Women's Empowerment Principles, these are a set of 7 principles which are meant to empower women in the company, in the marketplace, and in the supply chain of the company. The Women's Empowerment Principles are aligned with corporate reporting on environment and social governance. And therefore, by reporting on ESG, they're able, by reporting on the WEPs, they're able to show progress in terms of ESG reporting, which is, in some countries, it is a corporate requirement for disclosures, especially if you're publicly traded, etc. So this is on the private sector, and they also do see it, as I said, as more around diversity, equity, and inclusion, around the diversity of perspectives and how this expands their market, etc. So, we speak to the private sector in a different way. On the point on the social norms, thank you, Jumana, for bringing that up. One additional area we've noticed as well is that men are also very influenced by their peers and what their peers think of them. So another study which was done in Saudi Arabia looked at that element and noted that men are very influenced by what other men think of them. And so that idea of peer pressure and what is considered societally acceptable is an important indication. And lastly, on the issue of investing in care work, that entails 2 things. One of it is around investing in redistributing care work within the family, so between women and men in an equitable manner, but also between the families and the state. And that requires investments from the state in quality, affordable daycare centers, but also, as one of the colleagues mentioned, in elderly care, and especially in Lebanon, which is an aging society, investing in elderly care is very crucial. I cannot tell you how many women I know, including colleagues of mine, who have basically remained in Lebanon for the most part to take care of their elderly parents. It's a very big issue, and the responsibility of elderly care falls predominantly on women. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jaylan. Anne?
Yeah, thank you. I will be very brief because maybe also Anne and Martin and Christopher are willing to say a couple of words. I would just like to say 2 things, and the first is that I have often said that in this country that I know since 35 years, that is very dear, my second home country. You have the culture of Zaim. And to change this famous culture of Zaim is very difficult. And it will take time. So that's absolutely, as Jumana, you were saying, that these changes, and also what I also say, women are agents of change. But these changes, to have the change, it takes a long time, unfortunately. But I think that it's very important to change this famous culture of Zaim, of male Zaim. The other thing that I would like to sort of underline, because I'm coming from Finland, but I think that my Nordic colleagues will agree with me. In Lebanon, the role of the state has, since the early beginning, been minimal, mais vraiment minimum. And that is the contrary in our countries. So when the state has a role, meaning that we have this sort of understanding that the state is there to provide services, to take care of not only of those who are poor and oppressed, but those to take care of everybody, we are in the situation that we are in Nordic countries. I use now myself as an example. I don't have any family, so when I'm old, who will take care of me? I mean, of course, I'm going to use the famous Finnish services. I mean, we have all kind of elderly houses. You choose, you go wherever you want. And if you want to pay a bit more, maybe you can even go to a luxury elderly house. But this is really important, that you don't always, and I'm example, I'm by myself, I'm a single, never been married, never will be. Because I pay taxes, I get services. And I would like to say that it's not only when you have kids, it's also when you are a student, when you are a pupil, and when you get old. Shukran jazilan, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I? Yeah. But can I just say something, if I may, just to perhaps comment on what dear Annie has said. What she's described basically is a very rooted patriarchal system where, and it's very ironic because where the head of state sees himself as the father of all, but a father who doesn't provide, which is, difficult to understand. But anyway, so thank you very much, Annie. His Excellency, the Norway ambassador.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will make it very quickly, very brief. When you mention the system of Zaim, and you have the feudal system and all these things, we need to take into consideration that when we come up with stories from our countries, the Nordic countries, etc. Well, we got many things for free because we were extremely poor countries. At least Norway and Ireland was the poorest countries in Europe at the time. But then we had the Industrial Revolution. Okay, that changed so many things. So we got that for free. So when we compare, I mean, we should be fair. And you didn't have that in this country. So, and I don't think you will have it anytime soon. But we have to work on what we have. And Lebanon is a very particular society, as many Arab countries are. And I lived in Cairo, in old Cairo, in an area in the 80s called Al Ghawriya. And that's a part of Cairo I've never seen as independent women as there, apart from maybe one district in Amazigh, Libya, where the women were in charge, really. I mean, so there are, I haven't been back for a couple of decades, maybe 3, so I'm afraid maybe it has gone a little bit backwards due to certain political trends, etc. But there are many examples in the region, I think, that we can look at as models. So, small reflection there. Thank you.
Indeed. Dr. Azen, can I ask you for, if you want to reflect on what you've heard? Yeah. Any other, yes, Zena, tfaddali. Yes, sorry.
I think it's, I'm going to pick up just from the last point, something important for stakeholders working on the issue, but also for donors, I think, to think about in Lebanon, is that we are in a time of crisis all the time. I was born in '71, so I grew up during the war. I was always a dreamer, an idealist, an activist. And every now and then, whenever we think that we reach a small breakthrough in terms of development, human rights, labor rights, we again face a crisis, whether it's regional or national, political or security. And this is where I think also the funding framework is important, because we cannot work on these long-term changes through very small projects. And so as ILO, I think we have the institutional approach because we kind of can afford it, but still, I mean, overall, it's very important to think in Lebanon, how can we build on a momentum and have institutional continuity on issues, because the funding is very limited and unfortunately the state is not helping us have this continuity. I just wanted to close with this and to think in terms of care and gender, whether gender equality or women empowerment, how can we think differently in time of crisis and take this as maybe our slogan for the coming 10 years, I don't know.
Thank you. Actually, we're not closing yet. I would like to ask Her Excellency, Swedish Ambassador, if you want to share a couple of comments and
thank you very much. I think my Finnish colleague very well presented the sort of key points that we believe ought to be highlighted. This is my third posting in Lebanon. I was here the first time in the late 90s. And then I came back working for the UN 10 years ago, and then I'm back again. And what is a bit striking, though, when it comes to gender issue is the limited progress. And I think that's surprising in many ways. And I think it's very inspiring to hear many of your voices here, because there's so much knowledge and there's so much commitment. So I really hope that there will be some sort of breakthrough, because I know that there is sort of, on these issues, I've been on the table for so long, but I think the key is in the future to really make sure to mobilize before the parliamentary elections and the local elections whenever they come, because that's how you bring about changes. So I have a great hope for Lebanon, but it takes time and everything, like Anne, you were mentioning, it's a long process. But I think this meeting creates hope. Thank you.
Exactly. Actually, I want to link what you're saying to my final comments, but I wanted to ask Christopher if you would like to comment. And also open it again for this side of the room, that has been very silent, if you want to say anything. All the comments came from the left side.
Yeah. All right. I'm not sure that I have so much to add to my Nordic colleagues. I think I will echo what all of them have been saying. So what I could add is that we very much hope to continue sort of this endeavor together with you and the Asfari Institute. And if I could pick one point delivered today, I think it's the point about Syrian refugee women. I think it's right to point out that it has been somewhat absent so far. So just to say that if we are lucky to get financing for sort of a continuation of this joint endeavor, I think this is really a subject that we should include.
100%, yeah. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
Hi, thank you.
Well, I'm glad to have women in STEM from the AUB community.
This is the point that I wanted to address, because we noticed the comments are coming more from women. Maybe in the awareness campaigns that we plan to do, maybe we should include men. religious leaders, because we know that this country is very religious, and people listen to religious leaders and politicians. And I'm also a guest speaker at Virgin Radio Stars. I do shows with Miss Maya Nassar, and she has a program. I'm not promoting her, but she deserves to be promoted regarding this issue. We talk about leadership, management, and I'm thinking that this is a nice topic to tackle. A second point, I work in the Division of Urology, and we don't have a lot of women. We all had one resident graduated with us, which was like 10 years ago, because I worked there over a decade. So we are planning to do a study about gender equity, not just equality, and how to address it. So in case any one of you would like to, give us ideas, we already prepared the topic card. We're planning to do a qualitative study where we're going to interview 20 women and men, doctors, medical doctors and residents, and in the meantime, and then later on, we're planning to do the same interview with men after we get the insights of women. So we're not now doing the IRB submission. So in case anyone would like us to address something particular, we're trying to get the insights, the facilitators, challengers that women have, and accordingly see what men have to say regarding this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. I was hoping, I don't want to put you on the spot, Layal, but I was hoping from your own positionality and perspective as one of our most brilliant legal minds, if you would like to contribute to the conversation. Sarah, Layal, on.
I think that...
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Layal Saar. I'm the Executive Director of Seeds for Legal Initiatives. I think in those events, we have hope to see some changes in Lebanon. I know, I totally agree that we need a political will, and without a political will, we cannot change one sentence in the labor law. So I wish we have more in the parliament. We have a majority one day in the parliament to see those changes that we are fighting for since decades in Lebanon. Thank you for this opportunity, Lina.
Thank you, Layal. Jaylan, Sarah?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I just wanted to add one additional comment, which is we can't talk about women's empowerment without addressing personal status laws in Lebanon. So personal status laws in Lebanon across all confessions discriminate against women. They are based on interpretations of religious law, as all of you know, and they are adjudicated in religious courts that are mostly men. I think there's only 2 women religious leaders, as far as I know, or 4 maybe. So I think any discussion on women's empowerment cannot ignore the issues of personal status law that govern marriage, divorce, child custody, inheritance. And I think sometimes because it's such an overwhelming issue, we tend to ignore it, or we tend to not. I mean, there's many activists and many amazing work that's being done in Lebanon on this issue, but I just wanted to flag this for the record. Thank you.
Thank you so much. If there is no other comment, I would just like to briefly, take just a couple of minutes about how we're taking this forward and what is our next milestone. So I think pulling together these discussions, pulling together the content of the outcome documents that have come up after each of these milestones is one trajectory that we will be taking, because, as I said, we've been in conversation with independent women MPs, essentially Dr. Krakour, but also Dr. Azzuddin, who's very, very proud to say she's an alumni of this university, so that we take things very practically and give them something that they can work with at the parliamentary level. So that is one trajectory that we're taking. We're also looking at specific issues in terms of the recognition of care work, policy, care-friendly social and public policies, and what does it mean, both in terms of the private sector and the public sector. And this is also in terms of the trajectory. It's also at the level of engagement at the legislative level, but also engagement at the at the executive level. And I also want to announce that our third milestone under this initiative is going to be specifically around political participation. Political participation is not isolated from what we've discussed now, whether in terms of the burden of care or in terms of religious status laws. These are basically what weighs and what constitute the main obstacle to political voice, independent political voice and political participation. So that would be something that we will invite you to work on as a last phase. And separately to that, not related directly to this trajectory, you will also be hearing from us for a series of training workshops on various aspects of care work. For us, we talked about slow change, and that's really true. But having been there for more than 3 decades, I can safely say that conversation around care work, conversation around how do you normalize care work, how do you legislate around care work, conversations around these aspects and around the kafala system were not possible 10 years ago. This is something that has picked up pace during the last 10 years. It might seem like, yes, it is slow. I mean, we don't need so many migrant women workers to be killed before we start talking about kafala system. We don't need the burden of care to stop women from, aspiration and from work before we start talking about what it means. But it is now a conversation. We are in a place where it's picking up despite all of the difficulties around us, and that would be where we are heading next. So thank you all so very much for being with us. Despite the weather, despite everything around us, we're very grateful, and we're hoping to see you next time. And I would like, on behalf of the Asfari Institute and our friends with the 4 Nordic embassies, to invite you for a light lunch with us. Thank you so much, and we can continue the conversation over lunch. Lunch is served right at the end of the corridor. Thank you so much.